Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Art Tipaldi. I always like to start these sessions off by saying that the Notodden Blues Festival is one of the few blues festivals that I know of where they give you folks the opportunity to come and meet some of the performers who are playing here. You can share stories with them of your love of them, but you can also get to know who they are and what's important to them musically, and then you get to go see them out there perform. How many people saw Canned Heat yesterday in the Dam? Or how many people saw Dam Canned Heat yesterday? Which is the right way to say it? I don't know. So you saw them yesterday at the Dam. How many people, the last time they were here was 2006. Who was here then? Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know Fito was here and so was Skip. That was, again, some of my favorite performances were in the '06 when they were here. But I'll quickly introduce the guys up here on the stage. We have our bass player over here, Rick Reed. You can clap now. Or not. Harmonica and guitar, Dale Spalding, and vocals, that's right. In the center here, guitar, vocals, Jimmy Vivino. Over here, Fito Della Para, drums, and over here, Skip Taylor, manager, and really between Fito and Skip, they're kind of the glue that's held Canned Heat together for
57 years.
57 years. So give it up for these guys. And while you're giving it up for these guys, if you have any contact with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, get on the phone right now and get these guys in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Why are they not in it?
Yeah.
In America?
We're not in it because of politics. Bullshit from that one.
Politics and bullshit.
Yeah, politics and bullshit from those people in Cleveland. We don't care. We were just indicted into the California Music Hall of Fame.
Very cool.
And that's much more important than...
I've been
inducted.
Yes.
Trump gets indicted. We get inducted.
Probably,
A lot of indictment going around.
probably because they had the nerve to have hit songs as a blues band.
Yes,
And that's why
yes.
everybody's offended.
Yeah. Well, in America, you can't go a day without hearing "Going Up the Country," "Let's Work Together," or "On the Road Again" in some form or other, on a commercial, in a movie, in a TV show. And it certainly shows it's music that spans your 57 years. Was I right, 57?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Yeah. But they may not be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but yesterday, these guys got a stone in the Notodden Blues Walk of Fame. So, yes, somebody appreciate that. Yeah. Very nice. As I said, we have Fito and Skip, who are kind of the glue that holds the band together all those years. And I think what I'd like to do is start off with the two of them talking about the early days of Canned Heat and when it began and how it began. Because Fito has a wonderful book out called
Living the Blues.
Living the Blues.
Which is not here, by the way. I was very disappointed to come and not find my book. Yeah.
Yes.
But that's part of the reflection of the history of Canned Heat.
Exactly.
About always being underrated and underput
Yes.
everywhere.
Yes.
And that shows even here. You guys don't have my book.
Right, but they do have a stone.
Huh?
But they do
We
have a
did the
stone.
stone. That
You do
was
have a
great.
stone.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
great. But still, it's
I'm
been
gonna
many years of
yeah.
a lot of problems.
Yeah, I'm going to let Skip and Fito talk a little bit about how this band was formed back in the mid-60s, 65, 66. Yeah,
The end
so
of 60, really 66.
I'll move out of the way.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The creators of the band was Bob Hyde and Alan Wilson. Bob Hyde, the bear, the big bear, 300 pound. They were both musicologists and record collectors. They were not performers, but they loved blues music and they were experts in blues music. They knew so much. It was amazing how they would play records for you and talk to you about it, and they knew everybody, how it was played, what date, who played on it. I'm talking about collections of 78s, not even 45, 78s. Bob Hyde had one of the largest collections of 78 records in history. And Alan was a genius. He was very well educated. He studied in Berkeley University, and learned music there. He used to play trombone to start with, then he played guitar, and he was also an expert in jazz music. Jazz and blues are together, and that was the main reason for them to be around. And then the idea to create a band was, I guess Bob and Alan decided to start a band as a jug band. A jug band is the old-fashioned from the 30s, I guess, or the 20s. They used to play with a big bottle, blowing it, and all these primitive instruments. And that's how they started. They wanted to be very primitive and very down to earth. They never expected to end up with a popular band. After the jug band adventure for a few months, they started hiring professional musicians to help them out make a group, and that's the creation of Canned Heat. I don't know the original members. I know Mark Andys was there.
Stuart
Broadman, yes.
and Frank Cook.
Frank Cook later. There was a couple of drummers before Frank Cook. And so that's how the idea started. The idea started basically as a jug band that became later a blues band. Later on, around 1966, Bob hired Henry Vestine. Henry was also a record collector and a great guitar player. He was playing with Frank Zappa and Mothers of Invention at the time. He got fired from the Mothers of Invention because of drug intake, and he just liked to party a lot. Okay, and Frank Zappa didn't like that. In Canned Heat, partying like that was a given. It was no problem. No problem with that. Henry was accepted immediately. So anyway, that was when Henry came in around 1966, and that's the time when Skid
When I saw them.
for the first time. You can take it all from there.
I had a friend named Gary Essert who was at the UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles. He was head of the film school and built the studio there. Eventually found the Los Angeles Film Festival and FilmX, and just a real movie guy more than music. And he called me one day. I was an agent at the William Morris Agency in Beverly Hills, which was and still is the largest theatrical and music booking agency in the world, movies, whatever. And so he said, there are a couple of acts that are playing here at UCLA. Maybe you would be interested in them. So I went over that evening, and it was Canned Heat and The Doors. And they were students, two of the Doors were film students at UCLA. Bob Haidt was working at a record store in Westwood, California, right next to UCLA. And I went and saw, first the Doors opened, and Jim Morrison at the time was only reciting his poetry, not singing, but just standing and reciting his poetry. And you knew right then the guy was a star. You didn't have to be an agent or know much. That guy's going to be a star. And then Canned Heat played, and it was the dirtiest, scruffiest bunch of guys I'd ever seen on a stage. And I was not a blues guy, I was a rock and roll guy from day one. And there was something about the music they were playing that got to me, and I loved it and saw maybe some sort of future. At the time, Paul Butterfield Band was about the only band that was having any kind of blues success, and they had a top 100 album on Billboard and Cashbox, and that's all Canned Heat ever wanted. Just get a top 100 album, we'll be happy. Yeah. But I had all of them in my office the next day and signed both of them for representation, both bands, and wound up making record deals for the Doors and for Canned Heat.
Wow.
It was the very beginning.
Okay, let me take over now a little bit. So it comes 1967, and the beginning of 1967, they decided to replace their bass player. I guess it was Mark Andys, right? Yeah.
Basically.
Mark Andys became bass player for Spirit later on. Excellent musicians, all of them. And that's when Larry Taylor came in at the beginning of 1967, and they recorded the first album and appeared at the Monterey Pop Festival. One of the first, if not the first pop festival.
Really the first pop festival
ever.
done by Lou Adler, who managed Mamas and Papas, Johnny Rivers, the guy, if you're going to San Francisco,
Scott McKenzie.
Scott McKenzie. Yeah. And he had a record label, and he eventually became the owner of the Roxy Theater and brought Rocky Horror Picture Show from England to the U.S. But it was Lou Adler and John Phillips doing Monterey Pop Festival.
So anyway, we go back now to 1967, and that's when I joined later on. The guys got busted in Denver for marijuana. In those times, it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
And now there's a long story as to how we lost our royalties, etc. Maybe we can talk about it later. But I want to talk about me coming into the band. In 1967, after the bust, I guess you guys were arguing with Frank Cook, with the original drummer. It was
the little story that you might not even know. Right before your band played Bluesberry Jam, was it? That I booked.
Yeah, but that's
Jam
later.
Canned Heat.
That's after the bust.
But beforehand, Canned Heat was playing at the Ash Grove, where we used to play a lot, or they played a lot. And in the middle of a show, the drummer's playing upset me so much that right in a song, I went and took his cymbal stands during a song and pulled them away from the drums so he couldn't keep playing.
I didn't know that one.
No, I know. He was a jazz kind of drummer.
Yeah, that's the thing about Frank Cook. He was more into jazz, and that was his main thing. He really...
And that was the beginning of the end of me and Frank Cook.
Yes.
And also Larry Taylor really didn't like the way he played.
And I had seen Fito play with...
At the Tomcat Club.
Yeah, with, what was her name?
Larry Barnes.
No, the woman singer, the great
With Etta James.
Etta James, right, with Etta James.
Yeah.
I saw him play.
Yeah, they came to see me play. I was playing in a real funky little club, not too little, about as big as this room. That's pretty good. And it was in Torrance, which is a real funky area of Los Angeles where all the oil gets processed. So it stinks. It's a terrible stinking there, you know. But anyway, this place was in the corner of 190th and Hawthorne Boulevard. And it was called the Tomcat Club, and it was like a rhythm and blues club where white people and black people went. And we had celebrity night every weekend, and I had the privilege to play behind T-Bone Walker, Etta James, the Shirelles, Mary Wells, Big Joe Turner, many others that came every weekend, and I was just delighted playing for them, you know, behind them, and learning a lot about music, etc. And that's when Skip Taylor and John Hartman came to see us. And I remember, I can say that I met Skip Taylor years before Canned Heat, when he was a clean-cut, preppy agent for William Morris. I had just arrived from Mexico with a Mexican band. We wanted to try our luck in the United States. And somebody sent us to Skip. I mean, you were, I guess, the youngest manager, the youngest agent in William Morris.
Yeah.
And they sent us to see him, and then, you know, we talked to him. He didn't want to go for us because we were underage and illegal. We didn't have permits to work there, but we already had the band. And we were kids. We were like under 18 years old, so we couldn't even play in the clubs where you were booking. However, I knew Skip then, and then later on he comes to see me at the Tomcat Club, and I guess you like the way we were playing.
I liked the way he played an awful lot.
You know?
And so I had remembered that, and when it was time for Canned Heat to get another drummer, I booked his band and Canned Heat together, so the rest of Canned Heat could see him play without the drummer knowing that we were actually auditioning him. So
One thing.
Larry Taylor had a high standard because Larry Taylor's brother is Mel Taylor, the drummer for the Ventures.
Oh, wow.
Wipeout, you know, all that.
He's one of the originals of rock and roll drummers.
If Larry approved of you, you were in good shape.
Could I
I want to say something about the Tomcat Club. It was really funny because I used to wear a suit and tie, and we were like clean cut guys. You know, we all look alike in the band. And Skip Taylor, by then, Skip Taylor has long hair.
Well,
and he's wearing,
just over my ears.
and he comes to me outside the Tomcat Club. I'll never forget that conversation. He says, "Fito, there is something going on in the music business. There is a movement going on in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Do you know Jimi Hendrix?" And I go, "No." I knew Etta James, but I didn't know Jimi Hendrix. And he says, "Something is happening in music and you have to become part of this." And you know, they were already starting. And he was talking to me about the beginning of this great thing which became a renaissance in music in the late 60s. And he started talking to me about it. I see these guys with long hair and this Indian hippie stuff hanging in their chairs.
I signed the Byrds and Buffalo Springfield and the Doors and Jefferson Airplane, Big Brother and the Holding Company, Moby Grape,
That was the
the Grateful Dead. You know, all of these bands that were didn't even have record deals. They were just starting to play in Los Angeles, in San Francisco. And Canned Heat was one of those as well.
That's right. Yeah.
So after that audition we did, I remember Skip called me at 3 o'clock in the morning after we played that club together, right? He says, "The guys like you and they want to play with you and have a real audition with you." And I
rehearsal.
said, come to our ranch. You guys used to have a ranch in Canoga Park. And he says, "Come to the ranch tomorrow and we're going to play together, play with the band." The next day, on my way to the audition, I stopped by a record store and I bought a record of Junior Wells and Buddy Guy in the South Side live in the Pepper's Lounge.
Oh yeah, yes.
One of the greatest live records in blues. It was a coincidence that I happened to buy that record, and I had that record under my arm when I showed up for the audition. Bob Hyde opens the door and looks at me, and I go, with my accent and all that, I was recently arrived. Well, "I'm Fito, I'm the drummer, I'm here to play with you guys, to audition." And he noticed that I had that record under my arm.
Yeah.
Years later, he told me, the moment I saw that record, he says, "I already saw you play." He says, "But there were many good drummers there. But the moment I saw that record under your arm, I talked to myself and I said, this is the drummer for Canned Heat. This is a blues drummer." Because I had that record under my arm. He was a record collector. He had to judge me on those terms because that's how he felt, and that's I guess that's one of the ways that I went in and I was accepted in the band because I had that great record under my arm.
Yeah.
Besides my talent, of course.
And Fito, speaking of talent, what is it about your drumming style that fit in with Canned Heat? What was it that they
one of the
saw?
Harvey Mandel calls me old-fashioned, and he says he likes me because I approach old-fashioned. My father loved American culture, and when I was a kid, he used to take me to watch all these jazz movies like the Benny Goodman story, the Gene Krupa story, the Glenn Miller story. All those great movies of jazz music in the beginning. That's how I started. So my idea was the swing.
Right.
And swinging and drumming is so important to
Shuffle.
me. And that's
Being
how I
a
became a shuffle and swing drummer.
Right.
And you're asking, that's basically my specialty, and that's why Harvey calls me old-fashioned, because many younger drummers now don't understand that style. Okay,
right.
I mean, they are great, some of them, but it's just a matter of swinging.
Yeah.
And also, I always consider the drummer to be the engine that drives the band. That you in the back can control what's going on with the other musicians in terms of volume and speed, et cetera, et cetera.
That's what Jimmy says.
Yes.
When I tell him to play with another drummer because I'm so exhausted,
Yeah.
and he refuses to do that,
Yeah.
he says,
Yeah.
Well,
Fito actually controls the
having
band.
played with
Yeah, right.
having played with Levon Helm,
Oh, yeah.
I experienced the same thing I do with Fito, and that's, it starts at the drums.
Right.
And when that is right, when the drums are right, the feel of the whole band becomes better. When you see a band where the guitar player's trying to drive the band and the drummer's trying to keep up with him, you know, but it's the swing. I mean, the swing of, you know, I mean, I get it. I don't want to get too into it, but when I was 12 years old and I heard On the Road Again, my older brother had 3,078s in the basement that he collected. He had Sonny Boy on trumpet. He had Vocalion, Robert Johnson's. He had everything from swing to spirituals, to everything. And he brought that record home, and we played it in the bedroom where all three of us lived in one bedroom. We played it over and over and over again. And he said, whoever these guys are, they have the same records I have.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's cool.
He was right.
Yeah.
He knew that.
He knew
That's
that.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about the Woodstock experience? Nah. Okay.
Okay, I'll tell you the story. I'll tell you the story because Escape has to do a lot of it. We had just lost Henry Vestine a week before Woodstock.
Yeah.
He got
Lost
into a
meaning
big
he
fight with Larry Taylor because we were playing at the Fillmore West, and Henry got so loaded that we had to put a chair for him to be able to play in the chair. And then in the middle of the solo, he forgot what key he was playing in.
Oh, wow.
So he was really out there. I mean, that was Henry, right? Brilliant Henry, but sometimes too brilliant. Anyway, so that was a week before Woodstock. Eventually, I'll tell you more about that night. You guys will like this story. When Henry went crazy and Larry Taylor goes on the stage and says, I'll never play with this fucker again. On the stage. This is on the stage of the Fillmore West, one of the greatest places in the world, you know, for music. And I'll never play with this guy again. And so then Henry left, and he didn't play the second set, but Mike Bloomfield was there. So we called Mike Bloomfield and invited him to join and play with the Canned Heat. And he actually played that one night, the second set with us. At the end of the set, we invited him to play with us and stay with us because it sounded great. Of course, Mike was a great guitar player and he knew our music was the same thing. So Mike says, well, I'm exhausted of the road and I've been playing with Paul Butterfield for 4 years and I don't want to tour anymore. He didn't like touring. And so then the following day, Harvey Mandel was in the place. So we had Mike Bloomfield to play the second set of the first night, and the second night we had Harvey Mandel. Harvey Mandel is in the place. Henry Vestine didn't show up. I remember Skip coming to us and said, he who is in the band tomorrow shows up. And Henry and Larry were fighting so much, you know, that Henry didn't show. So we decided to hire Harvey then. We invited him over, and he played with us, and it sounded okay. But again, this is a few days before Woodstock. We were not rehearsed. We were still very uptight and sad about losing the other guitar player. You know, the original band was already broken for the first time. The first wound of the band. We were to suffer many others later, but that was the first one.
We were leaving for New York to play on the East Coast, like in 2 days.
In 2 days. So anyway, I'm in my hotel room sleeping, and I don't want to wake up, and I don't want to go to Woodstock. And actually, the beginning of my book says, "Fuck Woodstock, leave me alone." That's what I told my manager. He was trying to get me up and physically drag me out of bed. Physically. Get out of bed. He comes, Fito, turn the radio on.
Turn the TV on.
Turn the TV on. This is going to be the biggest gig you've ever played. And I'm like, don't bother me. You know, I don't want to know about it. And he's like, you better make it. And he actually got the keys from the maid of the hotel to get into my room because I wasn't opening. So
Well, on Thursday of that week, my agent, Johnny Podell, who represented Canned Heat and the Allman Brothers, so it was two main acts, and we played a lot of shows together. But we were supposed to play on Friday night at Hunter College in New York, and Johnny said, you know, why don't you call Hunter College and cancel them? I've got this other gig that's going to be this big show, and we're negotiating it. I'll meet you at the office later on Thursday. And I was ready to call Hunter College, and they called me. And they said, look, we want to cancel the gig, but you can keep the deposit, and we'll book it some other time, because this big show is happening upstate New York.
That was Woodstock.
Yeah. And so I went and I met with Artie Kornfeld and Michael Lang and Johnny Podell, and we made a deal. At the time, we were the highest paid act on Woodstock. It was $13,000, which was a huge amount of money at that time, when we were making $3,000, $2,500 a night. And I went in the taxi going to the meeting. I hear going up the country, and it's like playing on the radio in a taxi. And I said to the taxi driver, he said, "Oh, this is going to be number one." Da da da. I went, "Really?" You know, I didn't even know that it was happening, but it was. And so we made the deal, and I also negotiated with Michael Lang and Artie Kornfeld an agreement to allow them to record and film not only our band, but every band there. Just a one paragraph kind of thing that they could do it. We had to give permission to, after seeing it, for it to be used commercially. That little paragraph has become known as the Favored Nations Clause, and it appears for every festival, every event in rock and roll where they want to film and record it with the hope of maybe using it for some kind of commercial venture later on. Yeah. And at Woodstock, everybody signed it except Richie Havens, and he said, "If anything happens, just put it in my trust for my kids." That was it. Yeah. But an act like the Grateful Dead, they were all on acid. They played a horrible show. They never wanted it used. Yeah. It's never been seen.
You were on acid too.
Yeah. I took acid that day, the day that we played Woodstock.
The day we took off for Woodstock. Okay, anyway, the airport scene. So after he convinced me to go out there, right? We are at the airport in White Kills, New York. It's a little town and a small airport. And we're waiting there to see if we can get a helicopter to get there, because it was impossible to drive through.
See, first off, to get there, we knew we couldn't drive there. But our roadies in our truck with 2.5 tons of equipment that we had at that time, they took off for Woodstock. I said, I don't know how we'll get there, but I knew this girl whose father was president of American Airlines, and they arranged for 2 little Piper Cubs, 3-seaters, for us in Linden, New Jersey. And I said, okay, when Bob Haidt saw this, he said, I'm not getting on that plane. He didn't want to know about it.
I didn't know about that one. I'm talking about the press guys. Anyway, my story is there was another helicopter, a bigger one, I guess, that came in, and we saw these press people going. Some of your journalist friends, your colleagues, a couple of young guys with their cameras and all that, and they jump on the helicopter and we go after them. We were rowdier, and we were a little bit angry. We wanted to get to Woodstock, so Bob goes to the kids and says, "Where do you think you are going?" And they go, "Oh, we're going to report the news." And he pulls them right out of the helicopter physically. He says, no, we're going to make the news. And we took the helicopter. Yes. We took the helicopter from the press, and that's the time when we took off on the helicopter, and Skip, Bob, and Alan took LSD. Skip grabs his camera. He used to have one of those Pentax. You remember the old Pentax? Yeah. And he grabs it out of the window of the helicopter and starts shooting all these pictures.
The pictures of 400,000 people for a concert.
You know, eventually one of his photos came in the Ravi Shankar album.
Ravi Shankar at Woodstock. The
Woodstock
cover.
album. That's a picture.
The camera cost me $500. I sold that to Liberty Records for $500 for that picture, for that album.
So that was taken right there in the helicopter, and that's the moment when I felt actually grateful to be there because, as I said earlier, I didn't want to go there.
Yeah, right.
And that time that I saw that audience, I said, well, you know, he was right.
Yeah.
This was going to be the biggest gig ever.
And when we landed, Chip Monk, who was sound man, light man for the Stones for years, he was the announcer at Woodstock, and he came up to me and he said, when do you guys want to play? And I was listening, and here are 400,000 people. There was no sound. They weren't applauding. They weren't talking. I said, well, who is that playing? And it was the Incredible String Band. And nobody could care about them. I said, how about next? Because here came our truck. As we landed, our truck was pulling in right behind, and it had taken them 12 hours.
12 hours, yeah, that's a great story about the roadies.
And I said, well, we'll play next. He said, really? I said, yeah, because my favorite time for us to play is at sundown. You get the sun setting, the light, then it's darker, the lights come on the stage. It's just always more magical than any other time.
Yeah, cool.
So, anyway, one thing I want to talk about the roadies, I called them the infantry of rock and roll. Because many musicians in their arrogance and egos never give the roadies credit. And to me as a drummer, I always depend on roadies and techs to help me out. Since I was a kid, I used to have a big Indian roadie in Mexico that carried all the drums by himself.
Wow, yeah.
But anyway, that's another story. So anyway, the roadies made it. They pushed cars away from the road with the help from the fans, and they took 12 hours to get to Woodstock and bring our
It's
equipment.
about an hour and a half drive.
Normally it takes you an hour and a half. It took them 12 hours, and they did great. And as I said, I always like to give recognition to the unsung heroes of rock and roll. They are the Gunga Din.
The Gunga Din. Dean.
That's right.
What was it about Canned Heat that gave them that meteoric rise from, you know, before Monterey Pop to headlining almost at Woodstock? What was it about the band in those times?
Having on the road again, and then going up the country, getting airplay. And of our group of those groups that we've mentioned and talked about, nobody else had a hit. Jefferson Airplane had White Rabbit. Yeah,
but we were putting blues music on the top 10 worldwide.
Right.
You see, those two songs are definitely blues-oriented music, and that's one thing that we were doing. We were breaking through that. That's something that neither John Mayall or Paul Butterfield had. See, they had great bands, and they were pioneers on the white blues, let's call it.
Right.
But they didn't have worldwide hit records that were blues-oriented music, and that's the way we broke in.
Yeah. Now I know Canned Heat. You know, you're known as the kings of boogie. When did you guys adapt the boogie craze?
We were always in love with John Lee Hooker and his music. We always liked John, and Bob used to play his records all the time.
We needed 12 minutes on our second record. Honest to God, we had the album just about done. We had no other songs. We had 12 minutes that I wanted to fill. We made cards up, 1, 2, 3, and for each guy was going. Bob introduced each guy and gave him like a 2-minute solo, and I'd go 1, 2, next guy,
and they put the cards so we can stop playing after the minute.
So it was just a jam.
Okay.
And it became the boogie, and the next 3 albums we played the boogie, one for 40 minutes. We did a two record.
Well, in those times the bands were playing long solos and long jams and all that. It was a lot of freedom going on, a lot of stuff.
We do that song live, sometimes 20 minutes long.
Right.
Fito would play, 5-minute drum solos. So really one of the first before John Bonham and Zeppelin or anybody was playing long drum solos, he did.
You were mentioning John Lee Hooker.
I wanted to say, a couple of years later, we were at not a couple of years, a year, I guess, 1970, around that. We were in Portland. We were arriving in Portland at the airport, and we see this black guy picking up his guitar on one of the carousels out there, away from us. And immediately Bob Hyde recognizes him and says, "That's John Lee Hooker." And we just ran towards John Lee Hooker because, I mean, we love his music so much and we never met him in person. So we go to him and say, John, we love you, we love your music. And he goes, oh, you're the canned heat. I says, yes. And he says, I like the way you boys boogie. That's the first thing John Lee Hooker said to us. He said, I like the way you boys boogie. And that's when the idea came. Bob says, we have to make a record together. You see, and then when the Skip had to negotiate, it took him about 6 months to a year to get permission from ABC, because we were in Liberty Records and John was in ABC. So finally, Skip managed to negotiate the whole situation, we did the session.
Yeah, I called John Lee Hooker and I said, you know, we want to make a record together, and he said he'd love to do it, and he said, you know, I make a record in one night. I only do one take. You don't get it, that's it. I said, well, John, this might be a double album. And he said, well, if it's going to be a double album, you're going to have to pay me double money.
That was John. So anyway, that started a great friendship and a great relationship with John. We did that famous Hooker and Heat album.
Yeah, oh, I love
then
that
we did
one.
another live album in the Venice Theater, Fox Venice. With the Chambers Brothers and Ronnie Barron and John Lee Hooker. And eventually I ended up playing with John's band, besides playing with Canned Heat, the last 2 years of his life. And I was with him on his last show.
Oh my gosh.
And it was a very sad, very heavy stuff, listening to him. He's right next to me singing about going away.
Oh.
And he's singing Never Get Out of This Blues Alive.
Yeah.
Because he knew he was very sick and he was dying already. So when I had the great privilege to be with him and be with him in the last.
Oh my God!
After the Hooker and Heat album came out, we took him on the road, and I made a deal with him for 20 shows to give him $20,000. He had never seen anything like that in his life, and I said, however, I'm going to put in an account, and you're not going to get any of it until you're done with the whole tour. I said, and I'll pay everything else on the road for your food, your hotel, everything. And we'd have him do like 15 minutes to start the show, and then he'd come back out and play the boogie at the end of the show with us. And it really put him at another level in America that, you know, becoming a real star again.
He was the greatest.
Yeah, I've got that Roy Rogers album that Roy
well,
produced.
we were part of that
you
too.
were part of that,
we
and
were
I thought
part
to
of that
myself,
too. Roy invited us to be part of that too.
I thought, I had Roy yesterday as an interview here, and he was talking about John.
We were talking
Lee.
with Roy last night too.
Should have been at that table last night.
Should have been at that table. We were talking a lot about John. Great stories about John.
Yeah.
Some we could tell and some not.
I'm not sure. Skip, what time is it? We have to go
It's 25 of...
Okay, so if I can move ahead, and we'll talk to the three members here, but I just want to ask you, with all of the replacements that you've had to do through Mr. Death making his appearance, what do you guys look for when you're looking to replace a bass player, a guitar player, a singer, a harmonica player in Canned Heat?
To be in Canned Heat, and the Canned Heat band is not only playing the music and loving blues music, it's also a state of mind. Mm-hmm. It has to be kind of respectful to our founders. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Yeah. You know, you have to know who Bob Hyde was and who Alan Wilson was, and what they did musically. Right. So that's one of the main things about
when Larry Taylor realized that he might not continue to live, he recommended Rick Reed to play bass instead of him. Yeah. All of a sudden, when we didn't have another guy playing, his brother-in-law, he said, you might want to have my brother-in-law involved here.
And I knew Larry too, and Larry had said to me once, remember, he used to come and see us play a lot. Larry would come to see us play, and, you know, Larry didn't suffer fools. You know, Larry was very particular, and he would always say to me at some point, do you go on the road? And at the time, I couldn't do anything. I had the golden handcuffs with the Conan show. Yeah. And I would play around L.A., and Larry would come around, and I said, that's Larry Taylor, man. I want to play with Larry Taylor so bad, you know. But I think there was a seed in his mind that he already had.
But I can say something Jimmy won't say is one of the first lines out of his mouth. He said, "You guys don't know it, but I've been in Canned Heat since I was 13 years old."
That's right. And when I came
He
to
knew
the door,
every song.
My favorite news story is Rick said to me, "We're going up to Fito's at Santa Paula. We're going to play. He wants to play with you. He wants to check you out. You know." So, you know the way you walked in with the album. I walked in and he looks at me and he says, "You are Canned Heat." You look like Canned Heat. That's what he said. You look like Canned Heat. And first of all, I can't tell you the experience of what a lot of guitar players and musicians don't know is you get into a band like Canned Heat with a legacy and a sound. You have to respect that. You can't just come in and play your stuff.
Yeah.
You know, bring your giant pedal board, play your wanking, all your shredding crap. You have to respect the music because they respected Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and John Lee Hooker the same way.
Yeah.
And so these are what we call the new old guys. You know,
Yeah.
these are our closest to our forefathers. You know, so the honor is mine, of course. Yeah.
But Jimmy all of a sudden can start playing, going up the country, and he said, well, and he started doing an intro that I had never heard, or I'd heard but I had forgotten about.
The Alan
And he
Wilson.
goes, "This is the way Alan did it once."
Oh my gosh.
And he goes, "Gotta get going, gotta get going." And so
Yes,
I was saying in our little
Alan
band,
singing the flute part
Yes.
actually with words. He did that in Woodstock because we didn't have a flute player, of course. And Jimmy is the first performer ever to do that and do it right.
And he didn't like it.
And we called yeah he didn't
Now
like
he can't stop doing it.
we call that the Woodstock version of the Going Up the Country song. That's what we do it live now. I want to talk about Dale too
Yeah, I was
because
gonna say Dale, sure.
Dale has been in the band already close to 15 years now. 16 years. That makes him almost an original. He says he has 16 years and he's got the scars to prove it, right?
You got that right.
He's from New Orleans, so he's a great harmonica player, and he also knew about the Canned Heat, you know, before. You know,
I was originally from California too, and I remember in 1967, the Monterey Pop Festival. That's the year I graduated from high school. I already played the harmonica and knew I was going to be a musician. And when I graduated, I heard about the Monterey Festival, and I thought I need to go to that. But right at that time, I got a job in a warehouse. It was either go to Monterey or take my job. So I took the job, unfortunately. But my brother and I had the Canned Heat records in our bedroom. We were wearing out, you know, and especially after Monterey, that's the first I had heard of them. And we were into the blues, and we knew there was something special about this band. It was that, you know, they didn't play Muddy Waters or Sonny Boy Williamson. They had that spirit, but they had their own thing, and it just always touched me. And I didn't know that maybe 35 or 40 years later, Fito would ask me to join the band. But it's been an honor, you know, and I go back, way back with Canned Heat.
Yeah. What's it like for you guys to play these iconic songs that we all grew up listening
Well,
to?
ask
and-
him because he has to play like Larry's.
That's right, Larry's parts.
is an exceptionally unique bass player.
Yeah.
And that's important as important to the sound as what Fito drums.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your relationship here.
I've always been a Canned Heat fan. I knew Larry and would hang out with him. And he recommended me and asked me, and I said it'd be an honor and a pleasure. And here I am. You know, and
we had a little
loving
band.
these cats.
Larry used to play guitar too. He liked to play guitar, and we had a band just
little
to play
trio, yeah.
a trio with Rick, Larry, and I, and the piano player Malcolm.
Yeah.
Malcolm, yeah. But we did this band. It had nothing to do with Canned Heat.
Yeah.
We were just playing to have fun, and we got together in Rick's studio, and that's when I got aware of his playing.
Yeah.
And we have jammed with other bass players, and some of them they were like jazz oriented and very good and all that. But no one had the feeling that this guy had, because he has a very special way to approach the bass that Larry liked very much, and Larry didn't like
Yeah.
very much.
I've always loved blues.
And That's why before he died, he knew he was not going to be able to play anymore. He recommended for us to hire Rick, and I totally agree with that. And I'm very happy that we did hire you, and you're playing your ass off, and it's great.
He says, "Do you want to do, blah, 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 blah?" I said, "It's a little bit more than that to me, but that's the way you see it, that's fine."
Yeah, I have to say about Rick that he has played with just about every well-known blues player in the world. Starting with Paul
Feel very
Butterfield,
lucky.
Paul Butterfield and William Clark, and you tell us. Who else you play with?
Guys coming through on the road, and many blues. Started out with Butterfield and William Clark, and whoever came through town, they needed a bass player. I know
Plays with everybody.
James Harmon. I got to know the promoters that way. That was my first.
Big J McNeely.
Big J.
I know more than you do.
But
I saw him in
I'm a big
1979.
fan.
But I would want to know the promoter, and get friendly with him, and that way if someone came in, the first step, and then hear me play
Yeah,
too.
Rick is well known in the California area with Cadillac Zack and all that. They always hire him. He plays with bands all the time.
It's not about ripping it up, it's about getting the feeling and playing with the band, with the groove, and guys like Fito, as a drummer, and Dallas Taylor I played with, and field guys. And it's an honor, man, holding it down, and stay in my own lane, so to speak.
I think
Support the
I
band.
was in love with you before I was in love with your sister.
Is that a song? That sounds like a song.
Well, today that works.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's great. Jimmy mentioned having the golden handcuffs. Can you tell them about
Tell us about
what you did for 29 years?
very important.
Well, for 26 years, I was a blues man with a job, which is unbelievable. But when I played all over the East Coast. I'm from New York area, Jersey and New York. So,
Shamika's first two albums.
I worked at, I was like the house band of Chicago Blues. And I toured and had bands with Johnny Johnson, Hubert Sumlin, played with everybody that came through town from Chicago. They would pick up the band and we would play. So I got schooled very quickly. And my friends worked with Muddy Waters in the 70s, so I got to hang out with Muddy and play piano with him now and then with Pine Top. And because I was a piano player first. So my heart was always in the blues. But when I did get my job at Conan Show, music director.
Conan O'Brien,
The Conan O'Brien show at Late Night with Conan.
It's a very popular TV show.
The first thing I did was smuggle in some blues acts. And they said, who's in? Because when they started, they didn't know what to do, how to get people. And they would say, who's around? Who are you playing with this week? Because I knew I was gigging still. I said, Jimmy Rogers is in town. Let's bring him on. Great, James Cotton's here. So we're bringing all these blues guys on, and we're getting this reputation for being a really hip show. Because, then Coco Taylor came on, Etta James came on, Ruth Brown, Little Milton, B.B. King, Al Green. It was always like, Jimmy, who's in town? I said, well, I'm playing with Otis Rush, or I'm playing with, Kim Wilson. I'm playing with James Cotton this week. Why don't we bring him over? And
that show would reach an audience of how many millions?
even Shamika was on there because I
remember that.
worked with her father and knew her since she was 12. And I remember just Luther Allison, he slayed it. And people were like, who are these guys? So we all try to pay it back.
A late night TV show, like now Jimmy Fallon or
Johnny Carson.
Johnny Carson show.
And there's
Conan
Luther
O'Brien was the
Allison,
same thing. He was the musical director.
He's the musical leader.
26 years, 5 nights a week.
So I had a job.
So he's met everybody, knows everybody.
We played the blues all the time on that show, and to me it was just, to get to the next gig in town, I had to get through my day. And I was done usually. We taped from 4:30. I was done by 6 o'clock. I was right downtown at Chicago Blues or Manny's Car Wash or wherever the clubs were, and playing all night long with the people I really loved. So, everybody came through. But, always had in my mind that when I retire, I'm not going to play golf. you know, I'm not going to go fishing. I'm going to play in a band and tour. And this band came along and happened to be one of my favorite bands ever, because I felt that the kinship was not just about the music. It was about paying back to the forefathers of this music and respecting it. And we just made a record, right? I mean, we
have a new record, and we're very happy with it.
First one in 15 years.
First one in 15 years. We have lost hope in recording because we get ripped off so much with the new technologies that you don't get paid anymore, and people use your music for free. So we didn't want to record anymore. But finally, we have this unit put together, and Skip got inspired by him and another guy, a producer that also got us involved, Joe Ragoso. And we decided to make a record, and it wasn't easy. We had to organize it, put it together. We were able to do 3 rehearsals and play 3 live gigs so we can play live the stuff we just learned, and then record.
No time limits,
no time, nothing.
Just go do it.
We got 3 rehearsals, 3 gigs, and sessions. That's it. We didn't take no prisoners, and it came out great.
Fun. And have it be fun.
It's a very good record. I'm very happy that we did it.
And these 4 guys will try anything. I mean, I love Larry Taylor. He's like a brother to me with the same name as me, whatever. And I knew Larry way before Canned Heat. But there were things he never wanted to try. These 4 guys will try anything. That was the original Canned Heat guys. Also, I'm a rock and roll guy. They taught me the blues. I taught them rock and roll. And we combined the 2 together and wound up having.
Some of you that were there yesterday might have noticed that we did a Middle Eastern boogie. Do you remember that Tehran thing? So that's something that maybe with Larry would have never done.
Never.
But
Alan Pro would have gone for it.
In fact, I heard that you guys tried everything anybody handed to you.
I'm thinking about
We could ingest it.
That's different. When you're talking
Ingest it.
you're talking consumption.
Everybody brought their own creative energy to this project, and Jimmy wrote a few songs. Fito, we all just threw our own thing in, and I was obsessed about that Tehran theme.
Right, yeah.
And I
don't want to do that.
I know it. I said I know it's not blues, but I think Canned Heat could crush this. So we all.
But all the work was on your end on that.
Well, it was so much out of our wheelhouse, but it works, and we're very excited about it. We don't know. Yesterday was the first time we've played that in Europe, ever, live. So we're going to play it again tonight, and we hope that energy will propel us a little bit.
Right on.
Well, very good, guys. I think we can end. If
Any questions, anybody?
have some questions?
Come on, don't be shy.
I know on Sirius XM yesterday, a friend of mine actually called me this morning to tell me they had a 1-hour show on Canned Heat.
Oh, really?
These guys don't, And one of the things they did was talk about a song that I wrote 50 years ago called So Sad, The World's in a Tangle, which they are doing today, these days, and we just re-recorded it with a friend of Jimmy's and a lot of people, Joe Bonamassa, playing on it.
Oh, cool.
And it's very, very special the way it's come about. So.
Hey, Fito?
Yeah.
You know the King of Sweden?
Oh, you that story, that was good. It wasn't really the king. It was one of the. He was a prince or something like that. He was a fan of the band, and he invited us to his castle. And we went there, and he was growing this hemp. So Bob Haidt, the big bear, goes, "Look at all that, let's smoke it." And we tried to smoke as much as we could, but it didn't do anything,
Oh, they were going to make a chair.
And we made his mother, I guess, was a princess or somebody, the monarchy in Sweden. But then this guy also came to visit us later in Los Angeles. And it was really funny. He shows up in his limousine with his driver and all that. The first thing that happened is that the limousine got stuck in the mud. because Bob Hyde used to live in this canyon, in Topanga Canyon, and you know, he tried to make it to the canyon, and the limousine got stuck in the mud. So we had to first rescue the monarch out of the limousine, and we put him on an old funky Jeep, almost like out of Deliverance. You remember that movie? You know, something like that. You know, hey, come on over here, we take you there to see the Bob Hyde. So we are back at Bob's house, which was a constant party going on, lots of playing records and smoking weed, and so we have this monarch there. Okay, he's sitting there, and then we had a few people there. One of them was a friend of mine who was a Mexican journalist, and he was really drunk. And he started messing with the monarch. And he started going, so you're a monarch? And he goes, you know Mexico was the first country that kicked the monarchies out of America? You know? And this poor guy, I mean, he's there, you know, sitting there listening to records, and there is this drunken guy, this drunken Mexican messing with him. He was also holding a pot with broccoli that they were cooking. You know, Bob was always cooking chili and broccoli, all kinds of things. So this crazy Mexican guy has the broccoli in his hand, and he starts insulting the monarch. So Bob Hyde gets up, boom, knocks him out. The Mexican guy goes flying out. He's a little guy, 5'2", something like that. He goes flying out, and all the broccoli flies all over the room, hitting the monarch in his suit. But that's the story of the. It's not the king. He's not the king of Sweden, but he was up there, one of those guys, a prince or something. And I'm sure he'll never forget that experience of spending a night in Bob Hyde's house with my friend Parmenides. That was his name.
Well, once again, we want to thank the band up here, Canned Heat. We got Skip, Fito, Jimmy, Dale, and Rick. Thank you guys so much, Canned Heat. They're going to be on tonight at 8 o'clock on the big stage, 8:30 on the big stage. And again, our congratulations on the stone on the Walk of Honor. I look forward
How about putting my book in your library, huh?
I'm not from here. Your book is
I'm very disappointed you don't have my book here. My book is great.
Your book is in my library at
I have it in
home.
my bathroom.
Yeah, bring it.
I read it every day.
And then what, go to detox after? Thank you, everybody.
Anybody else got to go? Excuse me.